Meeting of the City Council and the Committee for Homelessness. And the first thing we're going to do, my name is Kelly Menke. I'm the Vice Council President. And we're going to go around and introduce ourselves up here. So,
thank you. Matt Scales, Chief of Police.
Heather Richards, Planning Director for the city. Remy Drabkin, City Council and Chair of the McMinnville Affordable Housing Task Force.
Susan Muir, Parks and Rec Director.
Jeff Towery, City Manager.
Jeff Sargent, Executive Director, Yamhill Community Action Partnership and Co-Chair of the Homeless Housing Task Force.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We're going to have Remy give us an update on what's been happening with the Vehicular camping program that she's been working on very hard, along with the rest of the Homeless Committee, and then introduce the program. So,
wonderful.
Remy.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Council President, and really to all who are in attendance today, virtually and in reality, and in all sides of the room. Your presence here today is really greatly appreciated by the City of McMinnville. I'm going to give a little background on how we kind of got here today, our efforts thus far, and then we're going to ask you, our guests from St. Vincent De Paul in the city of Eugene, to provide a brief on their program and perspective, and I'll ask you as well just to introduce yourselves before we get up and running. Today, McMinnville Planning Director Heather Richards will serve as a facilitator and guide us through some prepared questions from our city's work group and City Council. For those in the audience, public comment questions for today are available via these provided question cards and can be filled out during the forum and handed in to either Susan, Parks and Rec Director, or Jeff, City Manager. And then we will bring those questions forward. And we'll have a little bit of opportunity for some closing remarks at the end. So the City of McMinnville and its citizenry has become deeply engaged in a conversation regarding homeless residents living in RVs on city streets over the last many weeks. But internally, the dialogue and the solutions that we've been working towards have been really taking place for a couple of years. In 2015, the City of McMinnville became involved in some conversations that were occurring at the cooperative ministries in their efforts to serve the needs of the homeless population. City Council responded by engaging the community and service providers to self-educate, and later that year formed the Affordable Housing Task Force. The task force went on to develop an action plan to review and recommend to City Council policies and or amendments to current zoning ordinances, building division review processes, system development charge fees, and other governmental policies that encourage increased access to and construction of housing for citizens who are earning 80% or less of McMinnville's median income. The task force regularly charges subcommittees with exploring different initiatives before they come to council, and has successfully implemented a number of policy changes through this format. And so in February of 2017, a little over a year ago, the task force decided that homeless needs would better be served in a dedicated subcommittee, and thus formed the Housing for Homeless Subcommittee. Jeff Sargent co-chairs that along with Lindsay Manfred, who will be here in a little while, and she is with Health and Human Services. The group as a whole is comprised of City Council, County Commission, Planning Department, Health and Human Services, multiple service providers, the Housing Authority, the faith-based community, the police department, the business community, some of our local schools, and community members that are both housed and who have recently or who have experienced homelessness. And so with such a large group, the committee adopted a socio-ecological model that focuses on micro-populations within the homeless community and builds up to policy recommendations that will increase stability and or housing for those populations. That idea actually came from one of our co-chairs, Lindsay Manfrin at Health and Human Services. Currently, there are 4 work groups, one for each of the following micro-populations: veterans, senior women, children, and the one that's seated here before you today, whose focus has been on vehicular homeless. We've been lucky enough to have the help of a VISTA volunteer provided also through Health and Human Services, and over the last many months, we have largely looked to the successful car camping program that you have in Eugene, Springfield, and we've asked ourselves what a similar program would look like for the city of McMinnville. The information you've already shared with us has been great and in-depth and given us a lot of things we knew we could accomplish kind of before getting to this stage. So what we have accomplished to date is we have a pledge from Recology, who is our local garbage provider, to provide garbage service to car camping sites. A pledge from a local business, Allen Rudin Inc., which is also owned by a counselor, to fund sanitation services to our first 2 sites for an entire year. A pledge from a local nonprofit called Champion Team to provide 15 hours per week of site management. We've engaged potential sites and have asked all who attend our subcommittee and affordable housing task force meetings to actively go out looking for sites and to make contact with them. We've identified a set of criteria for those sites. Our legal department has been reviewing the behavioral contracts that you use. Our chief of police has also engaged the Eugene Police Department and the entire listserv. And city staff in planning and parks and recreation have reviewed and researched ordinances and city and state codes and brought a tremendous amount of information to the table. And perhaps most importantly, we've identified whom among the vehicular homeless this program could serve in our community. And that would be individuals who are currently residing in their vehicles and actively working towards transitional or permanent housing. So this meeting is really our next step in information gathering and outreach. And I can't thank you enough for meeting with us today. And with that, I will ask you to introduce yourselves and turn the meeting over to Heather.
I'm Roxanne O'Brien with St. Vincent De Paul Society of Lane County in Eugene, and I'm director of the Lindholm Service Center on Highway 99 that serves anywhere from 500 to 700 homeless individuals a day.
Hello. My name is Keith. Last name is Heath. It rhymes. My mother was still under the anesthesia when she named me. I am the manager of the Eugene Service Station, and I'm also the overnight parking coordinator for St. Vincent De Paul.
And then Reagan, can you hear us, Reagan?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes. If you can introduce
Okay.
yourself, that'd be great.
Great. My name is Reagan Watches. I am a policy analyst in the city manager's office at the city of Eugene, and I work on some of the city's homelessness efforts. So part of that is being a liaison to the overnight parking program and the car camping program.
So great. Thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it, you making the trip up here to McMinnville. And then Reagan, as I understand, is not feeling well today, but still is honoring her commitment to work with us for 2 hours. So thank you for that. I think if we could start off with, if Roxanne and Keith, you could explain to us a little bit about the program in Eugene in terms of the vehicular camping program. And then Reagan, if you can just give us a high-level explanation of how the city partners with that and the role. We're looking for the history of the program and how it's evolved to what it is today, and then some of the logistics. And then from there, we'll go into questions.
Heather, can I sort of tag on to that as well? Dan Bryant, the minister from First Eugene Christian Church, will be joining us on March 21st to do a presentation for our council during a work session. So Dan will be doing his sort of evolution of the program from the beginning as well. So if you want to add some things to Dan's spiel as you've all seen it, that would be fine, but he'll be here to fill in some of those blanks as well in a couple of weeks.
Well, I believe Dan was instrumental in working with St. Vincent De Paul for the first parking sites that we had. St. Vincent De Paul has been managing the parking program for the city of Eugene and Springfield since 1994. What we do is we match homeless individuals and families with vehicles to appropriate sites. Prospective individuals receive services at our Access Day Center for singles and families, where they receive hot meals, showers, laundry, case management, referrals to other programs to help the homeless on their journey to permanent housing. We have them come and check in, and that way they have an opportunity to branch out into some of the other services that we have, whether it be veterans, front door assessments, whatever the case may be. They're required to check in twice a week on the parking program so that you stay on the list. And then when the spot becomes available, we tell them where it's at, and we try to match the individual to the specific site.
Can you share with us how large the program is right now, so how many sites you have, and then maybe walk through what the process would be for if somebody was interested in, one, participating as a property owner, providing a site, and then two, how you match up clients to the sites.
Okay. So the first question again, please.
How many sites you have currently in the program?
Currently, we probably have about 60 sites for singles and family and children. And the second question was?
How go ahead.
How do you match them up? How do you match those up with the sites?
So if we know that Johnny likes to be alone and won't get along with 2 or 3 other people in the same site, we would find a space for Johnny over here. Where we know he'll be safe, he'll be by himself, and it'll be a perfect match for him.
Everybody has to register at our day access centers, either our First Place Family Center for families or our day center for singles at our center. And so we get to know our clientele, and we know where they'll succeed. And so if somebody's wants to be by themselves, we wouldn't put them in with several other people. Plus, we get to know their personalities and, what their barriers are. And so we try and match them to the site, and I'd say that's one of the most important things.
So I think what we'll do is we'll sort of do this as informal questions. If you guys have questions as we go, and we'll continue to.
Can you talk a little bit about the difference between the sites that are for singles and couples versus the sites that are for families? And in all regards, what you talked about the different check-in places, but what the different criteria are for being able to apply to one of those sites?
So for the family and children, it's more of an intense check-in process. There are families that are trying to get in, transition back into housing. So they're required to get a case manager, and they are drug tested, and the kids got to be in school. And on the single side, we only drug test for specific sites. Let's say we have a construction site, and they want somebody there at night unofficially to do security. So I wouldn't want to put a meth head, as soon as they lock the doors, they're cleaning out all the scrap and stuff. So we would do a drug test for those. We also do drug tests and background checks for churches, anywhere around the church or anywhere around the school.
Keith, I'm curious, who runs your background checks?
We have, it's called...
It's through the same place that we do our employee background checks
Oh,
for
chemical
hiring.
testing. Outside agent.
So what hasn't worked in matching people to the sites? Where have you run into difficulties?
Very rarely do we run into difficulties, but sometimes, like, let's say Alton Baker Park, we have 4 spaces there, and I might slide somebody in that we find out don't get along with the other people that are there. What happens is they're there for 90 days, and so every month somebody's coming in and every month somebody's coming out. And every now and then somebody will get in there that don't fit, what's already there. And either I'll remove them from the program or I'll move them somewhere else. Depends on what they do.
And how did you arrive at the 90 days? Did you start at 90 days? Did you get there? How and do you ever allow people to stay more than 90 days?
Yes. So initially when the program was designed, 90 days back in 94 probably was a sufficient time to get a first month, last month, and a security. But nowadays we know that's not possible. So we have stuck with the city sites, and we're going to be changing that soon, I think, at the 90 days. And that also lets us filter more people through the program. I have a waiting list with probably 100 people waiting that call in twice a week. And so we have the 9 city spots, and then the rest of them are private businesses.
Can you tell us a couple different types of businesses that are engaged?
We have Big John's Towing. It's a tow yard. Needed somebody there, again, for unofficial security at night. People were breaking into his place. And just having a presence on his property has zeroed that out. So he doesn't have to worry about somebody stealing his stuff at night. Yes, ma'am.
Question on this particular one, where they're kind of performing a service, just being there and stuff like that. Is there any issues that you've run into as far as employment law or workman's comp? That has not been an issue.
We can't require them to perform a service, neither can the host. But lots of times it's just kind of by osmosis that it happens.
Yeah,
And
there's
sometimes
just presence there and there.
it turns into work for some people too.
And we don't ask them to get involved in what's happening, just that they notify the police if something's happening.
So if, hey, get out of here, don't work, I got the police on the phone.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Do you have a rough approximation, a percentage perhaps, of how many residents in the program are actively working with you to find more stable housing, and how many are either not ready or are not looking for more stable housing? Is it 50-50? Is it 60-40? I mean, any ideas?
The majority of the folks that are coming through the program are trying to better themselves. So I'm at 65% maybe.
So if somebody doesn't have an income for whatever reason, whether they're need to be on disability or if you don't have an income, we can wait till the Section 8 list opens up. But there's very few housing available to you if you don't have an income. We also run in our center, the rapid rehousing program and several veterans housing programs. But what we do is we try and identify the ones that we feel like we easily can get into housing, like if you have an income. So then through Lane County, we have a program where we can help you with the deposit and things like that. So we try and kind of glean off the easy ones that we know that it'll take just a small amount of case management to get them into housing. Eugene's housing market right now in rental is like 2% vacancy rate. And so even if you have a great credit history and a great work history, if you're not making the right amount of money, you're just not going to get in. So it's very challenging that way.
And then the vouchers expire.
It's very tight here too for rentals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you.
So Roxanne, in that same vein, you mentioned, I guess my question is, you got a wide pool of people that are wanting to get into this program. How are you selecting or selective in your approach to get people into this program? I mean, you've got obviously a massive waiting list. How are you selecting those? I guess if you could go back in the historical side of stuff, do you remember, or do you have historical perspective about who initially was plugged into the program?
Well, initially, back in '94, because I've been here at St. Vinny's 24 years. There was a homeless camping site, program basically at Autzen Stadium, and that was before Autzen expanded, before the Ducks were winning. Nobody seemed to care. As soon as that started happening, so the mayor approached us, and so it's really changed over the years. I think the type of person that you're going to find in that program. We have so many other programs, and so many other homeless programs that because we have a great HMIS system that we can track the homeless all through the programs, all through Lane County, we are able to grab the ones with income, grab all the vets, and try and put them into the different slots that they'll, be successful in.
And I also chase a lot of these folks around during the week. So our contract with the city, so I'm a first responder for illegal camping.
Okay.
So I get a log from the police department every day, has a list of illegal campers, and I go out and try to make contact with them. And when I make contact, I try to educate them, tell them to come down to the station and see me. We can get you on our waiting list. And in the meantime, I'm just chasing them around until we can find them somewhere to park safely.
Okay. Thanks.
So if I understand, the goal of the program is to help those who are trying to achieve permanent housing by giving them a respite for a couple of months to put the money together for security, first month's deposit. And you originally started with 90 days based on the fact that could get you there. So in today's climate, so if we're starting new in McMinnville, what would you recommend to us in terms of a time frame so that, as we manage expectations and put a program like this together, that we're setting people up for success?
So I would say start with 90 days and then go month to month after that. So in the 90 days, see where they are. Mm-hmm. And then if they're not doing something to move forward, then you can give them the 90 and the next 30 days to move on.
And then
go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
It takes a lot of case management if you want the prospective person to be successful. And a lot of programs don't pay for that. And so, the nice thing about St. Vinny's, we have all these programs that we can kind of say, okay, you need to go plug into renter's education, or we do a front door assessment to get them on the, permanent housing list. And so, without that, it's very hard to do anything in 90 days,
Right. We've had a lot of dialogue that we don't have the same suite of wraparound services that you have.
Right.
So how can we structure something for McMinnville where people are successful and give them enough time to be successful? So that's one of the questions we're wrestling with. The other question I have relative to that is, do you have repeat clients participating in the program? So someone participates and for whatever reason, either 90 days plus a couple of months has gone by and they've been, asked to move out of the program. They weren't successful. They come back to you later and say, I'm in a place.
You have to wait a year once you've been in there.
Okay.
And then you can reapply.
And do you have a lot of that?
Not very much.
Not really.
I may transition somebody from one spot to the next only because they're looking for somebody to do the security thing and they're not ready to go into permanent housing yet, but they're still working on it. And then I know that they're reliable.
How many of your clients need to stay past the 90 days?
Not very many. So again, the ones that we have at the city spots that we rotate, if they're going to school or some medical stuff is going on, I'll extend it a month, and then at the end of that month, we'll see where they're at, and if they need additional time, I'll do it. Otherwise, I'll try to filter them through to get more people in the program.
See, it's only been the city spots that are the 90 days. And the city spots are very few. I mean,
Right,
it's
about
like
9 of them.
9, as opposed, 9 out of 60 are the city spots that you have a limit of 90 days. The other spots, it depends on the owner of the property and depends on the client on how long we'll let.
So we're developing sites, we're losing sites.
It's a constant. We just put in 10 new sites and we just lost 8. So, it's a constant merry-go-round.
So the 90-day marker is really only relevant to the city sites?
Yes.
And then the other sites are more of a
The month.
month-to-month based on your dialogue with what the property owner and also the client that you're placing there?
Yes.
And lots of times the client goes and gets their own spot. They go and form a relationship with the business and say, hey, can I park my camper there? This is the program that, give them keys information to talk to him. And if they find their own sites, it's more, it's probably going to be a longer term if they do find their own sites.
And the city also sends people to us to register their businesses and property.
So on these people that offer their own sites, are there any that are paying some small amount of rent or asked to do anything? It's
No.
strictly
It's actually against the program
against the
guidelines,
program to
yes.
do anything. Okay, thank you.
You can't have them, like, let's say you plug your motorhome into a church. The church cannot ask them to pay any electricity, that kind of thing, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about what city sites are involved and some of the other businesses? You mentioned the tow yard.
I actually have a whole list here. Keith, do you want to talk about the city sites?
So
WizTech.
we have 4 sites at Alton Baker, 4 sites at,
And do they know what Alton Baker is?
Oh, it's a park.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It's a public park. On the other side of Alton Baker, where the science factory is, we call it WizTech. We have 4 spots there. We have 3 spots over at the Naval Reserve Yard on Chambers and 13th. That's a city site.
Here's all your sites right there. And those.
And how many vehicles do you typically try to set up first at a site?
So each client can have up to 3 vehicles, but the majority of the time it's 2. But I have some clients that have a motorhome, and then each one of them have a car.
So are you talking about occupied vehicles, like how many
Yeah.
motorhomes?
Yeah.
So
If you
the
wanna call
city
them
allows
households.
6 on their sites,
Oh, okay.
but we found that 4 is the max we'll put in at any site. The more personalities you get together, the more
Harder it is to
problems
manage.
that you have. So we keep it to 4, and most all of our sites are just, 1 vehicle. So,
Most of your private sites are just one
Yes.
vehicle?
We have also Essex Construction, the Reserve Yard,
that's a city one.
and we have some churches involved with us as well.
And we found with churches that it seems like the single population does not work well at churches. We usually try and stick with just families at the churches.
Have a few in our rotation. So the parking program consists of the car camping, Conestoga huts,
Tiny houses.
and so it's all one program, and when they're calling in for one of those. So twice a week you call in and leave your information. We have someone that goes on to the voicemail, takes them off. I get a list, and then once the spot becomes available, or I go down the list. So if you call in every Monday and every Thursday, you're staying here. If not, then you're doing this.
So I've got a follow-up question. This may be for you, Reagan. What are the standards that the city considers when allowing camping on a publicly owned or publicly controlled site? And are there similar or different standards that the city exercises for privately owned or charitable sites?
For the permitted car camping on city sites, I think they're pretty similar standards. In the contract, we do have, a list of, minimal, I think they're pretty minimal kind of behavioral standards around, no disruptive behavior, no alcohol, things like that. And then I think St. Vincent De Paul and, tidiness, there has to be a storage area or, all the items must be maintained inside the vehicle, things like that. But the standards are pretty well set out by code too. This access to sanitary facilities, access to garbage disposal, the items not being viewed from a public site, no rent or things can be charged. Some more around behavior in the contract. And then, St. Vincent de Paul, I think really as the manager for the program sets out the standards for the participants as well and how they do their intake and screening processes and things like that.
Thanks. Follow. What about site criteria? Do you establish minimum standards, size of property, type of zoning, or proximity to particular facilities that may make the site usable or not usable for the program?
So we have no zoning restrictions. In general, the sites can be on paved or graveled surfaces with an occupied structure, which are generally, parking lots. And these are all for business, churches, nonprofits, public entities. So the parking lot of a place that has an occupied structure or a vacant or unoccupied parcel, and as long as there are the access to a bathroom, a portable toilet, and the garbage facilities, and but there are no other zoning restrictions around that or size restrictions. But by code, the city manager does reserve the right. Haven't been aware of us having to exert that. But if a site does become for some reason a threat or a nuisance, they can revoke that permission at any time.
Thank you.
Can you talk a little bit more about that last part that you mentioned, that you said if a city site or if a site does become a nuisance or a threat? And could I ask both of you to address that and address it in kind of two ways? One, have you had that happen? What's been the follow-up? And then I'll come back and ask the second part.
So off the top of my head, we had a site that was generated by one of the neighborhood associations. So I had 3 different families there. And because the people in the neighborhood didn't want them there, they called and complained to the city. And I'm talking 70 and 80-year-old couple, and the other people were maybe in their 60s and, elderly. 60s is not elderly.
Yeah,
sorry.
You better watch that.
Seasoned people.
I don't know if that's a good picture.
So they called and complained that these people were out there bouncing the basketball up against a fence, shooting out the lights, the street lights and such. And so we decided that we would just shut that down.
And, there was no validity to the complaints. Right. It was an 80-year-old not playing basketball at midnight.
3 o'clock in the morning.
But it was clear they just didn't want him there, so we just moved him. That is very, very rare, those complaints. City or no city sites, it's very rare that somebody complains about the site. That's probably 1%. Yeah. I think because they just assimilate into the community that you don't even know, you don't even know that there's some program going on. It's just,
We try to make sure that everything is nice and tight. And if we do get a call, then I go out and make sure that it's done correctly and that we clean up whatever it was that was said and we move on.
Okay, and then, so that kind of, what you brought up kind of relates to my other part of the question, which is, you said the sites kind of assimilate into the city, so how much preparatory work are you doing on the public outreach part? You said there's very little complaints. I mean, at this period in time in our city, we have a very high volume of complaints based on places where people are currently residing. So what did you do when you launched this program, and what do you do as you're bringing in a new site in terms of neighborhood or public outreach?
Well, currently, because of the program has been going since 1994, we just don't have any issues. People are aware of the program and they'll just assume that it's a new site, and they will even call in and say, hey, I've seen some new campers on 3rd and 4th Street. Is that one of your sites? And so that way they know if there is a problem, they need to contact us.
But we do very little outreach. That's probably the hardest place the hardest thing is to find the sites. Because you're losing them and trying to generate new ones. That does take the most time. And we also run a program for the city of Springfield and a brand new one for Lane County in an unincorporated area of Eugene. And we've been reaching out for a long time with this new county program, and we only have one site. A lot of that is fear because, we've actually had sites out there, out in the unincorporated areas that nobody ever knew about. I mean, we knew about them, but, so it's been happening all along. It's just that now that you formalize it, there's this fear that something's going to happen, that's not going to be great with the neighborhood. But
and all homeless people are not crackheads and drunks, and but by the grace of God, we could be in that situation. And so, in the meetings that I attend, most of the time, we get favorable mentions, and we just try to keep it moving. Yes, ma'am.
And I would have to say that the person that's running the program, Keith, that has a lot to do with it, because you have to have a person that the homeless respect, and it helps if the homeless know them, so they know that that they have your best interest at heart. And then again, you have to have the authority and portray to the client that you mean business. And so there's that balance there that you need, and that's probably going to be your biggest challenge is finding a Keith Heath.
How often, you said you drug test initially, do you drug test regularly after that, or just if somebody reports an issue?
After the initial one, we won't do it again unless we feel there's a need to.
And we don't drug test unless it's in a church or in one of those vulnerable sites. The poverty and what's the name of that one?
Human Rights Commission, I think.
The Human Rights Commission did not like the idea that we started drug testing.
Everybody.
We didn't drug test to begin with for many, 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 many years. Then there was some goings on out at our Autzen Stadium sites that we felt like there was some drug issues going on. So we gave the participants a chance to go and get drug tested or leave the program. So I think, 3 left?
Initially, 3 were gone right off the bat, and then the other 5 went and got tested, and then I was left with 2 out of 8.
Where did they get drug tested?
But normally we don't drug test unless it's,
You said where?
Yeah, where and how and who pays for it?
So we pay for the drug test, and we go through chemical testing. And so
it's the same one we use for our, for staff, for
I
our
show up and I
employment.
say, hey, I need you to go down by 5 o'clock today and submit a drug test. If not, then you can't be here tomorrow.
There's also the testing strips that you can get for, we buy them for other programs. Now that, the marijuana laws have changed, especially our employment programs, to find out the levels of pot in your system before you go in. But it tells, I think it's $3 a piece.
For the little kids?
Yeah, and it'll tell you a broad spectrum of drugs, methamphetamine, heroin, a lot of
Cocaine,
those.
opiates.
Yeah, opiate. And so I think I'd probably use those. It'd be a cheaper way to go.
Because ours, I think, is like $29 a test if we send them into the chemical testing.
Can we explore the identification of sites a little bit more? Reagan, I heard you talk about a city code, if that's correct, that talks about requirements. Is that just for the city sites or is that for all sites? And is there any process of approval from the city for the sites?
So I think I missed the second part of your question, but the first question, so what the code sets out is for any site, parking lot or a gravelled surface on a lot with an occupied structure or a vacant or an occupied lot. So that's for any site within the city limits. And then I don't think I heard the second part of your question.
Is there any type of approval process through the city for the sites?
No, that all goes through St. Vincent De Paul. But yeah, and as long as they stay within the parameters of our code, there's no separate approval process through the city.
So if we get a new site, we don't have to contact the city. It's a very, very easy project or process, and the city of Eugene is excellent to work with. Because we also have a small program with the city of Springfield. It's a way more cumbersome process and not near as successful because those, the prospective participants in the program, we don't get to see in our access center. And so that makes a big difference.
So the relationship you have with the potential clients is almost critical in terms of making the match for sites.
Yeah, they're coming to the day center daily, taking a shower, doing laundry or what have you. And so we have an opportunity to observe them.
It's I find it probably the number one critical point is it coming from, when you get to know somebody, you know where they're going to be successful at. I'll give you an example. Just last week, we have one site that we kind of run veterans through. So we let the VA run one of their clients through and then one of ours. And they don't contact with the person's name initially. Well, it happened to be one of our day centers clients that we never would have put in the spot in a million years. We get a call a couple days later, a lot of problems. It never would have happened had they ran that person's name by us, because we observed them every day and knew that wouldn't be a good fit at that particular site. You can have multiple barriers. You can have psychological or drug and alcohol issues. Does not mean you won't get into the program. We'll just put you where it's not going to be an issue.
So if you did not have the service center, how would you structure the program differently?
Well, it's going to be way more difficult for you.
I probably wouldn't do it.
Yeah, I'd run. You can kind of relate. No, you can kind of relate it to the city of Springfield because they don't. And I will say that we spend an exorbitant amount of hours on way fewer people because we don't know them, and
we have to get permission to set up the sites there in Springfield as well. So I get a site, I have to call and make sure it's in their zoning industrial.
So it is critical. I mean, I don't know, do you have a homeless center, access center here?
Not as structured as your situation.
Do you have an HMIS system that tracks, your homeless population in the city or county or?
We do.
Okay.
Yeah. We do for our clients, but we don't reach every homeless person in the county.
Right.
So we have a number of service providers. We have YCAP, we have the Housing Authority, we have homeless shelter, we have aspirations towards a service center similar to what you have, but we do not have we don't have a one-stop shop for the types of services that you provide.
And do you have any idea how many participants you're looking at?
That's a difficult question to answer. I think, what we've been trying to figure out is what pieces can we put together. And I think our work group knows that we're at a critical point of community involvement. So I think it depends what type of community involvement we can get to see what a program like this could bear for our community. We're at risk of becoming a chicken or an egg.
Right. And would you only allow motorhomes, or can somebody be sleeping in their car or their truck?
Our conversation has just been about vehicular homeless. So if you're residing in your vehicle.
What do you allow?
Everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. It has to be running when we go to move you.
Uh-huh. So it has to be mobile and working.
Mm-hmm.
And what other parameters, do you put anything on that, like current tags or insurance or anything, or it just has to be mobile?
Got to be able to move it in a moment's notice.
And if you didn't have a one-stop shop day center, would you limit that at all to more fully contained like RVs, or you'd still do everything?
Most of the RVs that are in our program are not fully contained.
Okay.
Yeah, there's...
I have some folks that just have trailers, so I would put them somewhere where they don't have to move them. So during duck season, the parking lot that we use for the...
And he's talking about football.
Yeah.
He's not...
Oregon Ducks football. So the 4 spaces we have over at the Science Factory they use that parking lot for the buses to shuttle back and forth. So I wouldn't put anybody over with just a trailer because they can't move it. They have to be moved by 3 o'clock on Friday, and then they come back after the event's over. And that's with the concerts too. So I would put them over on the other side where I know they could be.
Reagan, this question's probably for you. I'm the Parks and Rec Director, and I know you have, it sounds like 9 city sites, city-owned pieces of property. 2 of them, it sounds like, are within existing parks. Are there others that the Roosevelt Yard, did I hear, or the Naval Reserve sites, those are sort of city-owned but not currently being used for activities, so they're sort of vacant?
So we have the 2 sites at the Alton Baker Park, and then we have the Naval Reserve site that is currently being used as a car camping site. It's an unoccupied site that's city-owned. I don't believe we have any car camping currently over by our Public Works yard, but we do have a couple of other programs that are sort of similar to car camping, but they're bigger, but they're not part of the car camping program.
The sites that we've kind of brainstormed around here that are so far city-owned are something more along the lines of neighborhood parks where there is either a senior center or a community center. What are those sites that you've looked at in Eugene to put on the list? What's your experience with those types of sites, and what do you recommend for those types of sites?
So my experience so far, I've only been a liaison with this program for about a year, but our community centers get a lot of use during the day, particularly the pools, and they have classes and things like that. We did just recently open 2 new family spots that are at a couple of our community centers. They were very strategically picked. They're close to the First Place Family Day Center, where families access day services. And for that property right now, what we're doing is sort of a pilot. This just opened a month or so ago. Is the families who utilize those spots are required to leave during the day, so they're only occupying the spot at night. But again, that we chose that because it's very close to the Family Day Center where they can go during the day and where they're accessing services. So we are giving that a shot and seeing how that goes. Yeah.
And do you use any of your neighborhood parks for this use? Do you have any campers?
Not currently.
Just the bigger?
Yeah, not currently. Some of them don't have parking lots. Some of the more urban ones, I think, are pretty, they're pretty small and well used. So we haven't really ventured into that since I've been in this role.
Thank you.
Reagan, as a follow-up, do you provide separate sanitation facilities outside of what's already in the park for your sites?
Yes. And those are managed by St. Vincent De Paul as well.
So we go through above all sanitation and Sanipack.
So St. Vincent de Paul, can you share a little bit about your relationship with the city in regards to your contract with the city and how the sanitation facilities are provided and garbage is provided at all the sites?
So that funding is in our contract, and so we order the porta potties and the sanitation service, and so we have one of those at each site, depending on how many are at that site, because one vehicle can have 2 occupants, and so if you have 2 vehicles, could be up to 4 people. So depends on how big the dumpster is, how many people are at that site. But those funds are provided by the city within the contract.
And then have you had any issues with vandalism with the sanitation facilities that are being provided? Outside use of them?
They all have locks.
Yeah, they have locks, but some, like in Alton Baker, sometimes somebody would break the lock off and get rid of the hand sanitizer or break a toilet seat. And it's minimal. But we have a good relationship with both above all sanitation, the toilet people, and then the garbage folks. So in that park, rather than the standard 95-gallon and 65-gallon and the little blue recycling, we have a little dumpster out there. And then the porta potty. I have 2 porta potties because I have four spaces there. Mm-hmm. And then the locks come from above all sanitation, so that the clients don't have to be there in order for them to clean them. Okay. Yes, sir.
There are various stories out there about some towns sending their homeless to other towns that might have better services. It's unclear how true those are, but and here in Yamhill County, we conduct the homeless count each year, and we find the vast majority of the folks that we identify are from Yamhill County. Do you find that you have very many of your participants from outside of Lane County, and you have such a wait list? Do you have any kind of priority for Lane County residents?
No. So every year we got the country fair, we got train riders that come through, so we're always busy at the day center. And so as long as you're calling in twice a week, I'm taking them off the list.
But I think it's a small percentage, and I'm just going to guess maybe 15% are from outside areas, outside of Lane County.
I think this question might be for Reagan. I'm just curious. So St. Vincent de Paul has a contract with the city, and the city provides the funding for the porta potties and other essentials. Where does that funding money come from?
I'm sorry, where does the funding come from?
Yeah.
These are general fund dollars. And the contract is between our planning department and St. Vincent de Paul.
Okay, are they donations that come from other people, or just something you budget in as part of your general fund?
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing.
Are these funds donations? Are they federal funds, or are they just part of what you budget as?
No, they're the city's general fund dollars. So, yeah, not federal funds, just out of the city's general fund through our planning department.
Okay, thank you.
And have you had any backlash from the citizens of Eugene about using tax dollars to fund these programs?
Not that I'm aware of. Again, this has been a pretty long-standing program, so it's possible that when the program was initiated, there was some conversation, but no, I haven't heard any. Yeah.
Can we, to follow up on that conversation, can we explore a little bit further how St. Vincent De Paul serves as a first responder for illegal camping? I'm assuming on the public right-of-way. And so a couple of questions to you, Keith. When you first make contact with someone, what does that look like? Are you talking to them about the code and that they could be towed, but here are some services that may be available to you? And then to you, Reagan, as a follow-up, has the city calculated what type of value that provides to the city by having St. Vincent de Paul be the first responder versus police officers being the first responder?
Okay. So.
I don't ask short questions, do I?
They need to ask a question and then do the follow-up.
Yeah, right. So generally speaking, so I get the list and then I go out and, as I said, most of the folks that I'm chasing around, I know. So when I pull up, I'm looking at the license plate and I recognize the vehicle and, hey, Bill, got a complaint against you. Here's a notice. And then they have 24 hours to get out of that area. So anywhere in the next 30 days within the city that they're found illegally camping again is subject to being cited and towed. So they're called willful violators at that point. So after that's done, I say, hey, come on over to the station if you're not already on the list. Have you been calling in? Yeah, I called in Monday, but I didn't call in Thursday. Where am I at on the list? Well, you got to call Monday and Thursday, and that keeps you on the list.
Can I just recap that to make sure I understand it correctly?
Yes.
So you go out as the first, there's a call in, there's a complaint. You go out as the first responder. You provide a citation of sorts, and then they have to vacate that site immediately. And then if there's a second complaint on the same vehicle within a 30-day period, at that point, the vehicle is then subject to tow.
Correct. They're considered willful violators. So in this process, so I go out 4 times. So if I can't make contact within the 4 times, because most of the folks know the hours that I work, and they could even be in there looking at me and just not opening the door. So then I kick those back to EPD, Eugene Police Department, and then they go out after hours to make contact. So they don't always have to send me. If there's a safety complaint in the community or in the neighborhood, they'll just go out themselves. Generally try to let me be the first responder before they go out the site and tow. And some of those folks are chronic, and some of those folks are the ones that don't want to do it the right way, and those are the ones that wind up getting cited and towed. Yes.
So if they call, then they don't get cited by the police, right? So we're gonna ask for public questions at the end because we're recording and we want to get this all on recording rather than having people talk through the audience.
Keith, how often are people actually getting towed within that 30-day window? Or
It's rare.
very rare. And then what's the citation they're actually getting cited with?
That I'm giving them?
No, on the second time. If
Oh.
they're subject to tow, like, is there a monetary fine?
Illegal camping,
Okay.
and I think it's like a $200 and some ticket.
Okay.
But they always give me an opportunity to go out and
Yeah.
make contact before they come in. So if I tell them that this vehicle was over here again, then they know they're going out to enforce.
Yeah.
Process is like what I understand is like a 2-hour process to get the tow truck out there, and then you're towing somebody's home away, and so we don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. So we try to give them an opportunity to do it right.
guess for Reagan, I'm sorry.
Okay. So Reagan, the follow-up to that is with the contract with St. Vincent De Paul providing those services, have you seen value in the city for that in regards to the police department not doing that?
Yes, definitely. So the way that car camping is addressed at the city of Eugene is it's a complaint-driven process. So a complaint comes in to our non-emergency police line, and then it goes out to, if it's on-street car camping, then it's sent out to St. Vincent de Paul, and they respond. I do think that's been very effective in that it has lessened the load on our police, and it's provided a way for people to get information about services that may be helpful to them, or to get on the permitted car camping wait list. I will say that we do still have an impact that I think has grown, from my understanding, over the past few years around on-street car camping in the city limits, and I think that's just been around the need has gone up. So the city police do still get calls. However, it's been really helpful to be able to have St. Vincent de Paul as a resource to go out and work with people, and before police need to go out on a first-time basis.
I had a question about insurance. Is that a concern in terms of if something happens on the site? Who carries the insurance? St. Vincent de Paul, the city, property owner? Is that part of the structure of the program?
Yes.
St. Vincent de Paul, through our contract, we as we do with most of our contractors, they have, to carry general liability insurance, commercial liability insurance for themselves, so when they do their work. Otherwise, liability is on the property owner. We don't we don't take any liability for private property owners that decide to become a host.
Reagan, what about your public sites?
The city sites, you said?
Yeah.
So then we, as the property owner, we would maintain that liability, just like for anything else, any other activities on our property.
Okay.
And I will say this, all the many years.
I'm sorry, what's that?
Oh, I was just going to say, in all the years that we've ran the program, the insurance has only come to play one time, and that's when somebody fell at a church parking lot over a rock. But other than that, there really hasn't been any issues.
Right. Yeah, I would echo that. It hasn't been something that's come up.
Keith, are you the only one managing the day-to-day car camping?
I have a couple fill-ins when I'm not.
Okay. Okay. So how many? And I don't want to get in the weeds here, but real quickly, how many times do you go out a day and provide people with information about services that St. V's has?
It's a daily basis.
It's a daily basis. They didn't clone you? How many cars? Wow. Okay.
So what I do is, I get the log and then I try to strategize where I'm going to be, so then I can go check on the sites that's in that area.
Okay.
So the legal sites. Right. So he kind of just maps out his day, like, I got to go address these illegal parkers, and so I know I've got 3 sites over in that area. I'm going to stop by and making sure everything's going smooth.
Thanks.
So my day is pretty much spent generally in the mornings. I'm at the day center till around 11 or 12, and then I go out in the field in the afternoon.
And the permits have to be renewed monthly.
Right.
Yeah. Even if you're in there for a long term, you still have to come in and check in and get a new permit for that month, the next month.
Why do you think property owners participate in this program?
One, they want to help out in their community. 2, it's free security. and then it's a win-win for everybody.
And do you have, for your property owners, you've had some transition and turnover, but do you have long-standing property owners as well who have participated?
Yes.
The turnover lots of times happens because they're going to be building on the property, or the property changes owners, things like that. It's usually not
nothing
something
bad.
that's happened with the campers.
Mm-hmm. How do you go about generating new sites? Do you do an active request out to the community? Is it word of mouth amongst the property owners?
We go out.
Go out and solicit. We have a little handout here that we just keep it short and simple. Basically.
It's what I read in the beginning.
Okay.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Currently using these, trying to generate the new sites for the River Road, Santa Clara, unincorporated area that we got.
That is the hardest part, is to get the sites. And even with, St. Vincent de Paul has a great reputation in Eugene, Springfield, so they know, we usually run our programs well, but, it's a constant turnover.
And some neighborhoods are not used to this population, and so there's reservations.
Right. So we have a couple of potential property owners probably in this room if you want to do a little sales job for us for that.
Well,
it's a win-win.
It's a win-win. This is how there's no easier way that you can help your fellow man in need. Is how I look at it.
Try it out for a month.
It's nothing that you have to buy into for long term, but boy, we've just had really good response from our property owners. There's just not a lot that goes on that's an issue. People get these ideas built up in their mind, like they have in our unincorporated area of us trying to start a new program out there. All these things built up that really doesn't, have much reality to them.
And they're afraid, and they're stereotypes. I was at a meeting yesterday at a church trying to generate a new site, and one of the ladies in there had some reservations, and she was asking about who pays for the porta potty, who pays for the garbage, and do we require them to have electricity and this and that. So we were explaining it to her. And I said, we also have a spot down the street here at the church over here. And she says to me, well, this is a nicer neighborhood. Okay?
Maybe not.
So you have people out there that are not very receptive to it, but she's just one of many that was on the council, so I think they're going to override her.
So you brought up electricity, in this day and age with cell phones. Do most of your sites provide access to
It's not a
electrical
requirement.
outlets?
It's not a requirement, but
And I would say most of our sites don't.
But if they choose to allow that, then that's fine. We had a site years ago where the guy was charging for electricity and cable. So I had to go and shut it down because we can't charge them for anything.
So a follow-up kind of on the mix of the sites, about how many tiny homes and Conestoga huts are involved in the program, and then I'm assuming that anything that's not one of those two choices is a vehicle of some kind. But can you finish that out?
Right now, most of the Conestoga huts and tiny houses are at churches.
Okay.
And I think he's wondering how many.
How many?
Are you wondering how many we have?
About.
Okay, so hold on.
And people are always, in Eugene, it's a real smorgasbord of people with tiny houses, people with huts, and lots of times a community member will sponsor, will build their own. They got the specs, will build their own tiny house, and then they'll give it to us and to place and manage somewhere.
So at the Unitarian Church, we have three Conestoga huts.
We got one at St. John Divine.
Three at St. John's Divine now.
Okay.
3 at the Church of the Resurrection. Hope Lutheran, we have a tiny house.
On wheels.
On wheels.
And that was one where a pastor actually paid for it, paid to have it built, and then asked us, and then donated the house to St. Vinny's, and then we run them.
So those were the Eugene ones, and then we also have 2 at Northwood Christian Church, 2 at Everett Memorial in Springfield, and the other one, Seventh-day Adventist Church, we just added, but a lady built it. Private owner got the specs from the person that builds them and built one in her house, and we found a place for them to put it up.
And these tiny homes, they're just basically a sleeping unit, correct?
Conestoga huts and tiny homes.
Yeah, okay, that's what
I'm too tall to stand up in them, but
Unlike, there are, I think Emerald Village is, in Eugene, they just put on their first tiny house, and they do have plumbing and electricity.
Well, I've seen some of the others, and I know they were very basic.
so the Conestoga huts, you got a twin bed in there, a dresser, a smoke detector. There's a window in the back. You can lock the door in the front. One person, very comfortable. 2, can get 2 in there, but you'll be close.
Keith?
Sir.
In your program, how do you manage individuals or families with pets? Do you have specific sites for pets?
Right. So any of the city sites, we can't have any pets unless it's a CNI dog, but the private sites will allow dogs and pets.
And it depends on, we also, like we know our clients, we also know the animals. And we know which ones will be successful on the sites. And
There's a difference between a companion animal and a service animal.
Yep.
And a lot of folks have companion animals, not service animals, and they try to debate that.
And there is that debate, and so we've adopted a policy at our center, which that's a big issue, is if it acts like a service animal, it is. So that eliminates about 99.9% of our animals, because we say, okay, that current, we will let you call that a service animal, but it's not acting like one right now, so you need to make sure it has more training. And we even give them videos to train them themselves, so they can join back in once the animal is acting in an appropriate manner. I mean, our center sees so many a day that we just, when you see 300 to 500 people coming through that day center for the homeless a day, you can't have the issues with animals. So that really worked, because I called the federal government and the city and the county and the state, getting guidance on that service animal versus companion versus, and you can't ask any questions, and every one of them detects seizures, and there's just all these, how can you prove it, but you can't ask it. So I just go by their behavior, and it just kind of took care of itself.
Yeah, you tell me it's a service animal, the next minute he's on the counter.
He's on the counter grabbing your hamburger. Yeah.
It's not a service.
Keith, real quick, I know there's a bunch of questions that they want to get to, but can you give me an idea? I know I talked to the captain from Eugene PD, and they will say that these programs that you're managing they are not call drivers. That's good. But the question is the dusk to dawn programs. She did say that essentially, where are they going during the day? I would assume they're going back. They're going
to our center.
To your center.
So the dusk to dawn is like across the street from us.
Okay. So these, and how many people, and are they required to do these weekly check-ins, and then?
I'll let Roxanne take
So Dusk to Dawn is a program that we've been running for 3 years. The first year it was 20 people in a tent on the property where our access center and our Lindholm Center is. Then last year it was 60 people in 3 tents on our property. This year, St. Vincent de Paul bought the property about a block down from our day access center. And so now it started off, it's a winter program. It runs November 1st through March 31st. It was 80 people in 5 military tents on our property. The city of Eugene just kicked in, just asked us, can you help 15 more people for the month of March? So we said yes, so we ordered another military tent and all that. So now we're helping 95 people every night. They are up by 7, they walk down to the center block, their breakfast is ready, and they sign up for the showers and laundry and all that. So right now till the end of March, we have 95, and then they'll be back out.
We also have 10-car.
That's what I was.
Oh, the safe parking.
Safe parking.
Okay, safe parking is what it's called. Is that attached to that program?
Yes, but it's very different. It's basically you drive into a spot at night and you got to be out by 7 in the morning.
Okay.
So that's only 10 people on one site, the Lane County Behavioral Health. It's on Lane County's property. It's not run by the city of Eugene. And so that's very, very easy to run because very minimal problem, minimal contact. We have a staff member go by there every morning to make sure everybody's out. And I don't think we've had one complaint this year at all, and only 1 or 2 complaints last year. So.
I've complained.
Sanitation's that provided also?
Yes,
Okay.
Dumpster and porta potties.
Okay, thank you. And are they required to be in like some sort of wraparound services where they're checking in or?
So these could be people off my list.
Okay.
For the Monday, Thursday.
Okay.
And so I pulled them off there.
Waiting for them to plug in. Okay, thank you.
And that's a good question when you say required to be, we don't require anybody to be in services or we won't help you.
Okay.
We suggest many things. A lot of the homeless fear housing, believe it or not. A lot of people will say, oh, I talked to Johnny on the street corner and he doesn't want housing. That really isn't true. He's afraid of housing. That means responsibility. It means money. Where am I going to get it? So if you approach the person without a local address, say, hey, I have some funds. If I could manage you for 2 years with some case management and help you out and, either get you on disability or get you a job, would you be interested in a local permanent address? There's nobody that turns you down.
So in the effort to get to questions from the public, let's ask one more question and then we'll go to some public questions. Does anybody have a last question they want to ask for right now?
We have about 40 minutes left, so we do want to close this out at 5 because there are other things going on today, so.
Okay.
Just mind.
So I have a last question.
Why don't you take it, Heather?
I was trying to be generous. When we talked on the phone, you talked about one of the reasons this program is so successful is it's almost self-policed because people who get into the program don't want to lose their opportunity associated with the program. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that and also talk about the other thing I was surprised about when we talked on the phone is that you have had minimal negative circumstances. So minimal times when you've had to engage and actually evict people from the sites. If you could share that, that'd be great.
So for me, I approach my job with, number one, it's not a job to me. When it becomes a job, then I won't do it. I enjoy what I do. I treat people with respect. And so when I'm going into a situation like that, it's respect. It's not working out here. You did this or you broke a rule. Unfortunately, you have to leave. And 99.9% of the time, it's very peaceful. They understand what they did or what the situation was, and it's time to move on. And I also tell them, leave here peacefully, and then I might consider you for something else down the road. If you cause me problems, then we'll have to get the police involved, and then it goes bad from there.
I think he's only had the police involved 1 or 2 times.
1 or 2 times.
In how many years?
I've been doing this. I've been with St. Vincent for 12 years. I've been doing this for 10 of those 12 years.
for that. Do you
And
want-
it's a one strike out. You know, there's no nonsense, and Keith tells them that right up front when they're going over the guidelines.
It's in our
You're not
contract.
I'm not gonna come out and ask you to follow the guidelines that you're agreeing to. You break one of them and you're out. So he puts that expectation right up front.
So you have a set of guidelines that every camper agrees to abide by?
Yes.
I understand my permission to sleep in this designated area may be revoked at any time for any reason. When I leave this site, I will take my vehicle and my possessions.
Do they actually sign a contract with you?
Yes.
That's what I thought. Thanks.
The contract, and then you
Yeah,
get your
and
permit.
if I can chime in, I would just say echo too that the St. Vincent de Paul has just been a great partner. They're partners with the city and the community on a lot of efforts around homelessness. But I think the success of this program has really been can be attributed to the oversight and the management. Keith and Roxanne are very responsive. They know their clients, everything. I would echo that from the city's perspective, we just hear and have to get involved very rarely because of the oversight management is very strong.
So Reagan, do you think the city would have ever initiated a program like this without a partner like St. Vincent de Paul?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Sure. Do you think the city would have initiated a program like this without a partner like St. Vincent de Paul?
That's an interesting question. I mean, St. Vincent de Paul has a really strong reputation. I think it's possible that the city would do something on a very, very small scale as sort of a pilot. One thing to mention too is that while the most of the sites in this program are managed by St. Vincent de Paul, there are some churches that manage their own, camper in a Conestoga hut or something. And as long as they can abide by code, it helps the property owners immensely to have St. Vincent de Paul there as a partner to oversee and help with the costs through their contract with us. But they're a very strong partner. I could potentially see doing something as a pilot on a very small scale. But yeah.
Last question or public comment?
You guys want to ask some public questions now?
Sure. Yeah, let's make sure we have some time. So we have a lot of public comments that have been and questions that have been submitted. A number of them we feel have really been answered, and so if you don't hear your question, we feel like it's been thoroughly answered. We've also received a few ideas that are kind of off the topic of today, so I'm not going to introduce those right now, but we have them, and if you'd like to resend them, we're open to that discussion as well. And then two of the questions, two I'm going to start with are actually ones that I've kind of heard, but I'm going to ask again just to be very specific. And so one of them, Jeff had said earlier, and we got it on a public comment card as well, very specifically, do you think that homeless people are moving to Eugene because of your program? Great.
No.
And the other one that was, you can do it.
I think this one is when people are on your list and they're not provided a site yet and they haven't made it to the top, are they getting fined constantly for that, or how do they manage that transitional time before they get into a site?
They call it the Eugene Shuffle. So what you do is you get in somewhere late at night and you get out early. And you're not leaving garbage, you're not making noise, and you're being a good neighbor. The ones that normally get tagged are the ones that are causing problems or making themselves known where they are.
And those are the ones that end up on your list in the morning?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Have you ever been, you had mentioned some human rights violations earlier, and this question is whether you have ever been challenged on any constitutional rights violations for towing somebody's home or for any other reason.
I don't tow anybody's home. So the ordinance for illegal camping is in place, so the police go off of that. I just go out for a notice and let them know what they're doing is illegal, try to educate them on how to do it right, and if they choose not to, then the police come in and do their job.
Okay, and Reagan, do you mind addressing that as well?
Yeah, I don't know of any lawsuits that have come through in my time at the city, so I'm not aware of any.
I know that there's been people who've gotten their motorhomes towed have gone to court and tried to fight it, but because of our login lists and such, we made contact with them. They've been warned, so it's documented that you've been warned before, and you're in that window where you knew that you could be told.
I think this might be the last question. Where does the funding come from for the wraparound services or the case management piece of that? How do you fund that down in Lane County?
That's St. Vincent De Paul funds. We have, our Day Access Center is partially funded by Lane County, to the tune of, I think, close to $300,000. It costs about $1 million to run, and so the revenue from our stores goes to backfill those programs.
So follow-up question to that. This may fall to you, Reagan, to answer as well. Are there any programs that are currently supported by the Human Services Commission that contribute either directly or indirectly to either the case management, wraparound services, or the camping program that you're aware of?
Is there any funding from the Human Services, from Lane County Human Services, that are directed to these types of programs? Is that the question?
Yes.
The funding for this program is through the City of Eugene. We do have these winter strategies programs that the funding for that comes through Lane County Human Services. The way it works is the city contributes funding to the Human Services Commission, which is an intergovernmental group made up of Lane County, the City of Eugene, and the City of Springfield. So those entities pull together money with state funding and other sources to distribute out to a variety of human services in our community. The city has a few programs that it directly funds, and car camping is one of those. However, winter strategies, so Keith and Roxanne talked about the safe parking program, which is just overnight during the winter months. That also includes the big match-style tents. Other emergency programs, those do go through the Human Services Commission.
But the city will take their funds and give them, just like that extra 15 people in our Dust to Dawn. It came from the City of Eugene, but they gave it to Lane County and just added it on to our regular contract.
Does anybody have any other questions on the panel up here?
I do have one other question, and Reagan, this might be for you. It had come up in our previous conversation, and it's a numbers question. So if I'm in the ballpark, if you let me know if that's correct. So one thing that we heard previously was that the City of Eugene was before this program became successful was spending about $300,000 a year in code enforcement. And that number came down to about $100,000 a year, approximately. And we also heard that there were about 1,800, I think it was, code enforcement call-ins annually, and that's now come down to approximately 500. And so I'll just 500 annually. So on those two things, both the cost savings to the city and the demand on city services, I'm wondering if you can just again address that briefly.
Yeah, I'm assuming that those numbers came from the police department in regards to responding to calls about on-street camping. Is that correct?
Well, this was in our previous conversation. But I'm pulling that information forward.
Probably got that from William.
Yeah, so
Oh,
it
yeah,
came
that's
from
right.
William, and it was specific to the on-street camping discussion.
Okay. Yeah, that must be data from the Eugene Police Department, which I don't know that I can verify that. I know that the numbers did go down considerably in the 2000s, I believe, that decade. I'm not sure where we're at right now. Like I said, my understanding from conversations with police is that we have seen an increase in calls. But, you know, again, that's an increase in calls to that non-emergency line. So that those are ones that are filtered over to St. Vincent de Paul. So I can say that there is a reduction on impact to our police department and having to be that first responder. But I don't know where we stand with the numbers right now in terms of how many get called back and how many they have to actually go out to.
I just wanted to ask if there was anyone else in the audience who wanted to provide a question for us to ask on a comment card as a last call. Please provide it on a comment card and we'll bring it up. And then to our panel, as McMinnville's considering this program, are there any learning lessons that you would like to share with us? So things that you tried that were pitfalls that you would suggest to us to avoid, things that we definitely need to have as part of our program because it wouldn't be successful without it?
Run, no.
McMinnville's a wonderful community.
Don't you dare.
Love it here.
I would say that who's ever gonna run it, just be respectful in what you're doing, and people will respect you back.
Anything from you, Roxanne, in that regard?
I'm just thinking of pitfalls. You know, we started where you guys are now years ago, and I'm sure you're trying to avoid any mistakes we made. But, you know, we just put one foot in front of the other. And you're, you know, each community is different. Each, you know, the services in the community are different. But I just say put one foot in front of the other, and it's going to become apparent what you know, what the issues are right away, and then just address them. It's better than being paralyzed by what ifs and, you know,
And then,
things that may not happen.
And we learn from things that we tried that didn't work.
And one thing that's really good about the city of Eugene and St. Vincent de Paul is they let us turn on a dime. If, you know, just like we can get something up and going in a week. You know, our Dust to Dawn program from beginning to end, it was all funded and devised and up and running in 1 week. So there's a very fast turnaround and with the city, the county, and St. Vincent de Paul, they're all action oriented, and it makes our life, if something's not working, we are allowed to change it almost immediately, and that helps a lot.
And then Reagan, did you have anything from the city side in terms of learning lessons or sacred program elements that we need to make sure we have included?
Yeah, I would say, you know, pick a strong partner, and you know, I think the way that the city and St. Vincent de Paul have moved on a few different things is kind of starting small, see how it goes, and then expand from there. Tweak it as you need to. My sense is that that's the way the city has worked with St. Vincent de Paul, and been responsive to community concerns, to each other's, tried to be responsive to each other's concerns or things that come up. So, yeah.
Okay. Did you have more questions from the public? Okay. So at this point, Remy, you want to have some closing comments, right?
Sure. Does anybody else want to?
Does anybody else have any other questions? Sounds like okay.
Okay. Well, I guess other than a tremendous amount of gratitude that we have the three of you and your continued support while we go through this. What we tried to make an extremely thoughtful process. I think one thing that I've heard over and over again is that your program and the success of your program has really been driven by the community, nonprofit and faith-based community, and that the city has found ways to allow it in the code. And I think that for us right now, where we are as a city, is that in order to start finding success in these really very complex issues, that our unhoused neighbors right now really need the support and the partnership of the housed citizens of McMinnville. I can tell you that YCAP has already been able to place 3 families in permanent housing from those that were residing on Dustin Court. And I think at this point, more than anything, I am really looking for and asking for action from our community. So we have put together a list here, a sign-up list. So if you have, sorry, I don't want to talk with my back to you, and I'm really talking to you right now. So if you have the ability to donate a place, a site, if you have the ability to do sponsorship, to get involved and start bringing pieces of this together, if you can sponsor a porta potty, if you can support the nonprofits that we've engaged to help in this process, if you know of a place that would be appropriate, whether it's at your church or your local grocery store or your place of work, and you can go out and you can have those conversations. We are actively trying to find good partnerships within the community and create some success here and take away from a lot of the consternation that's happening in our community and the divisiveness. We are all residents of McMinnville, and this is a time when we need to help each other out and raise a hand. So, sorry. So I'm going to pass this around, and if you can get involved, or Howie's got one in the back, and if you can get involved in any way, now is a great time to do that. So please do. Please stand up here with me and stand up for your community. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much to Reagan and Keith and Roxanne for coming and talking to us. It's been absolutely fabulous. It really has been a good meeting. And thank you all for attending. We really appreciate everyone in attendance today and the questions they asked. And with that, I'm going to close the meeting.